It's quite interesting being given the topic of simple living high thinking in the ballroom of the most luxurious hotel in all the world. We were given a tour just before coming down here of the most luxurious suite of the hotel. And as I was looking around, I was thinking, what am I supposed to say here? But actually, simple living, high thinking is a state of consciousness. One can apply these principles even if one is a billionaire, a millionaire, upper middle class, people living in little villages, or even swamis like me who don't have a single penny to my name. Because simple living high thinking is to live without duplicity, to live with the values of compassion rather than the values of selfishness, arrogance, and greed. Throughout the world in great religions, we find kings and queens and little sadhus living in caves, living by the same principles of simple living and high thinking. It is said that you can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy. What are those things that are the true definition of wealth that money just cannot buy? This is the subject we will briefly discuss today. Mahatma Gandhi said that nature can provide enough for all people's needs. But nature cannot provide enough for even one person's greed. Some years ago, I was speaking at an American university. I was asked to speak in a class on economics. I haven't had a bank account since 1969 or signed a single check, but I was supposed to speak to these postgraduate students on economics. So I asked the professor of this class, very high, learned person in his field, I said, can you give me a definition of what the subject of economics really is? He told me, from an academic perspective, economics is dealing with a problem. That material nature has limited resources. And there are many people in this world who have desires that require unlimited resources. The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells that greed, selfish lust, is like fire. The more you put fuel in the fire, it never pacifies it. The fire blazes higher and higher and hotter and hotter. And this is the condition of the world. People think they could find satisfaction and fulfillment more in terms of the quantity of what they acquire than the quality of the values of their lives. It is said that if you lose your wealth, you lose nothing. It's confirmed by some little bird in someone's cell. If you lose your health, you lose something. If you lose your character, you lose everything. There was a great saint. His name was Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He lived at the end of the 19th century and beginning of 20th century. He had 10 children, a wonderful saintly wife. He was one of the most esteemed judges, magistrates in the British court system in Bengal, India. He had many homes and estates. He was a great scholar. Even Babaji's renounced monks would come for his blessings and wisdom, because he had such deep connection to his own heart and to the hearts of others. Whatever he did was with such compassion and such love for God. Through his life and through his many, many dozens of books that he wrote, he taught the necessity of having a balance in our life. Establishing priorities that are sacred and living by those priorities under all conditions. In business, it is a divine virtue to earn with integrity and to spend with compassion. That is simple living, I think. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, through his life and his teachings, he taught that there are various aspects of our lives. We have our occupational profession, our domestic duties to our family and relatives. We have duties to the overall society, to the governments. But we also have spiritual duties. Dharma means to integrate all of them. Yoga, or true religion, is to integrate the sacred spiritual ideals and values that we hold in our heart with everything we do and everything we say in life. And it is that choice that brings meaning and fulfillment to our life. And it is the wealth of those values that are the greatest richness that we can give to our children and our grandchildren. Because ultimately, everything, everyone, everywhere is looking for fulfillment. A foundation is very important in order for a building to stand through the storms that will inevitably come. The ballroom in this hotel, one of the most costly buildings on planet Earth, is built on a very strong foundation. As far as I know, it's kind of in the sea. Now, we don't see the foundation. Nobody, when they come in this hotel and they see the gold and they see the domes and all the fine marble and furnishings and the fountains, nobody says, this place has an incredible foundation. But what we don't see holds up everything that was built on it. Without a strong foundation, when a dust storm or windstorm or sandstorm or a cyclone comes, everything collapses. But with a strong foundation, it stands. It's a simple principle, but it's critical to us, and so much we forget the importance of having a strong inner foundation in our own lives. Because in the world we live in, there will be temptations. There will be fears. And when we are subjected to them, we are very vulnerable to relinquish our values, our ideals, our integrity. But if we have an inner foundation that is strong, then we understand that even losing everything is wonderful if I live by what is true. And what is that foundation? It's inner fulfillment. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that true intelligence is not about having PhDs or MAs or street smartness. True intelligence is when our enlightenment comes from within ourselves. Our happiness and fulfillment comes from within ourselves. Yoga, religion, spirituality is essentially to reconnect us to our own essence. And when we find that, we are joyful, with or without everything or anything. If we are bereft of recognition of the wealth within ourselves, because our nature is to seek pleasure, anandamayobhyashat. We're constantly trying to find it outside of ourselves through so many things. But we never find it because it's inside. It is said that in a cultured society, people love people and use things to express their love for people. But unfortunately, too much in this world, people love things. And they will manipulate and exploit people to get and to keep those things. That is an empty life, a shallow life, a pitiable life. However apparently simple or ornamented it may appear externally. I have seen people in this room who are extremely wealthy and powerful economically and socially. And how much they're working so hard with such intelligence, motivated by how they can serve and love God and how they can serve and love all God's children with compassion. That is a saintly life. I also lived with a yogi in a cave in the Himalayas when I was just about 19 years old. He lived in the middle of a jungle. And I found out later that another yogi who lived for decades and decades in a cave in the same jungle, some distance behind him, shot him. One yogi shot another yogi with a gun to death in the back because he was envious that more people were coming to the cave of this other yogi than himself to get inspiration and blessings. Envy and self-centered arrogance for the Himalayan yogis is possible. And saintly, pure life of detachment is possible, even living in the topmost suite of this hotel. It's a matter of consciousness. It's a matter of values. It's a matter of our foundation. Wealth, according to the Gita, Bhoktaram Jagataspasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Wealth is not our property. Possession means control. But in this world, there are higher forces. The stock market, changes of government policies, or even some wrong decisions, or inevitable death. Everything's going to be taken away from us. The spiritual perspective, and this is universal to all great spiritual paths. Everything in creation is inherently sacred. If it is used for a sacred purpose, we are caretakers of sacred wealth. And to utilize everything in a spirit of compassion, in a spirit of love for God, is the actual utilization that brings us fulfillment. Just like a knife. If a knife is in the hands of a thief, he will kill someone to steal from them. If the same knife is in the hands of a surgeon, he will save someone's life. So everything within the world is potentially spiritually or material, according to the values that we hold within our own hearts. True fulfillment is to love and to be loved. Nothing else can touch the heart. Things, prestige, power, money, these things could give some semblance of happiness to the senses and mind, but cannot touch the heart. Think of a little girl. I've seen it. A little girl whose parents, they worked so hard for money. And she's dressed with beautiful ornaments and wonderful clothing. She looks pretty, but she lives in misery because her parents don't have time to give her the one thing her heart needs: to be loved and to actually accept her love. Everyone is like that. What is the origin of that human tendency? It originates in the Atma, or the spirit, the soul's love for God. And God has many names and has appeared and manifested dharma or religion for the same essential purpose throughout the ages in various places. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata. To teach us how to reconnect with that love that is within us. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful verse. When I first heard this verse, after searching the world over for meaning and purpose in my life, I remember thinking, this is it. This is the essence of everything I've been learning from so many places in my whole life. May I share it with you? Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gabhihaste. Suni chaiva swapaki cha pandita samadarshana. Wisdom is defined in this very simple way. True knowledge is the ability to see every living being with equal vision. Whether one is a high priest, or whether one is in business or in politics, or whether one is a farmer or a mother or an educator, whether one's a little Swami, whether one is an elephant or a cow or a dog or a cat, wherever there's life, life is sacred. Life is given by God. Aham bija pratapita. Every living being is a child of God. We have a body. And a body is an incredible vehicle. And we have a mind, which is like the interior of that vehicle. But we are the Atma. We are the living force. And that living force is Satchit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of happiness. When we understand who our true self is, self-realization, then we naturally can perceive the true self in everyone. We are all one family. We are all relatives on the spiritual level. It is said when you water the root of a tree, that water naturally extends to all the leaves, branches, twigs, and flowers, every part of the tree. And similarly, when we find our true nature within us, we realize our natural, spontaneous, endless love for God. And the testimony that love is true and real is it extends to every living being. You cannot love God without living as an instrument of compassion for all beings. It is that compassion that is the greatest need in the world today. Living by that compassion is the true meaning of simple living and high thinking in whatever particular field of life we may be in. Not long ago, I was walking through a redwood forest in Northern California. It was so beautiful. These trees, some of them are 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old. The highest trees, the widest trees on the planet. And I came upon a circle of tourists. And in the middle was the forest ranger. And he was explaining the underground secret of the redwood forest. Now, I was a teenager in the 1960s in America, so I still have a lot of enthusiasm for underground secrets. So I stood behind the tourists and I listened. And he explained that these trees, the biggest, tallest trees on the planet, have been living here for thousands of years. He said, what's interesting is usually for a tree to stand, the roots have to be really deep. But the redwood trees don't have deep roots. He said, over the centuries, there have been devastating earthquakes here. Massive storms, frigid winters, hurricanes. How did the trees stand and keep growing and growing and growing through all of these challenges? The underground secret is very simple. The redwood trees, in their intelligence that God has given them, underground, the roots grow outwardly, searching for another tree. And when the roots of two redwood trees come together, they wind around each other and make a permanent interlocking knot. All of these roots are seeking to make knots with all the other trees. Even the little tiny baby trees that are so vulnerable. Their little thin roots are wrapping around the giant ancient trees' roots. And they're given all their strength. Directly or indirectly, every single redwood tree in the entire forest is connected to each other. And because of that, even through the worst storms, together they grow and they grow and they grow. God teaches us many things through nature. If we develop our roots and make a spiritual connection, then we understand the wisdom that in giving we receive. And the more unselfish and compassionate our giving, the more we receive. By helping one another, by serving one another, that is where our greatest strength is. And what is the strength? In the happiness within the heart that it creates. Through whatever we do, through our business, through our politics, through our speaking, through our family relationships, we are sharing the joy and the grace that we have connected to within our own hearts. That realization is accessible to everyone if we just make the choice. Simple living, high thinking is to live with spiritual values. As said, whether we are billionaires or millionaires or villagers or little swamis, that is our true wealth. Thank you very much. And it is this legacy, because we can speak so many things. The example of our life is the greatest thing we contribute to our families and to the world. If there is anything that is desperately needed within the world today, where there is so much strife and so much disunity, it's people who live by universal spiritual examples. The deepest and realest love we can give to our children, grandchildren, and all generations is giving an example to them. Of a life of compassion. I'm so grateful.